Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is really on the architecture of lasting love. Specifically, we're looking at that complex tension between, the initial surge of attraction and the quieter foundation needed for relationships to actually endure. We're asking about the fundamental factors predicting long-term success. Is it that intense initial neurochemical hit, what we call chemistry? Or is it the foundational skills and shared values, compatibility? So the central question, and it's a tricky one, is this. Given that intense initial attraction is chemically, almost analogous to addiction, is this chemistry mainly a detrimental, blinding force, something we should actively try to suppress, or does it actually serve a necessary function, maybe in just getting past dating inertia? My position, grounded in empirical relationship science, is that chemistry is, frankly, a dangerous and misleading signal. Compatibility is really the sole reliable foundation for an enduring connection.
Okay. I think I come at it from a slightly different angle. You've outlined the dangers of that initial neurochemical state perfectly well. And the data about VTA activation, yeah, that's undeniable. But dismissing chemistry entirely, I think that ignores its critical, maybe even necessary function in just getting a relationship started. My perspective is that chemistry, volatile as it is an essential biological trigger. The focus shouldn't be on suppressing this natural impulse, but more on managing its intoxicating effects long enough for genuine compatibility to show itself, to take root. I mean, without some initial spark, how many relationships just fail to launch?
Right. Let's delve into the science of that spark, because what we've discovered kind of makes the term romance feel a bit inadequate. The initial attraction isn't just a strong feeling, it's really a neurochemical storm. A rapid-fire cocktail: dopamine, norepinephrine, phenylethylamine. Dr. Helen Fisher's research was very clear here. This activity fires up the exact same reward pathways as severe addiction, specifically in the ventral tegmental area. And just consider the common symptoms when you're falling hard for someone early on. Losing your appetite, can't sleep, obsessive thoughts, can't concentrate on anything else. These aren't signs of healthy attachment building. They are textbook signs of addiction, even withdrawal. This hyperdopamine state, it's inherently unstable. It lasts, 12 to 18 months maximum? So when those chemicals inevitably level out, if you haven't built real compatibility underneath, the relationship just collapses. That initial high only served to, delay the inevitable crash. And often, that intensity is a profound misinterpretation. There's research showing that intense chemistry frequently functions as trauma recognition. The nervous system, it's seeking familiarity, right? So it misinterprets the anxiety caused by unpredictability, like that hot and cold partner. The breadcrumbing, it mistakes that for excitement. This actually conditions the brain to seek out partners who recreate familiar, often unhealthy childhood patterns, like, say, emotional unavailability. Long-term success, on the other hand, it relies on those measurable compatibility metrics from the Gottman Institute, avoiding the four horsemen, that's contempt, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and showing high emotional attunement, which means responding positively to a partner's bids for connection about 86% of the time.
86%?
Yeah, compare that to just 33% for couples who end up divorcing. It's a stark difference.
Okay, that's a powerful indictment of neurochemistry, I'll grant you. But you seem to be defining the entire biological process by its absolute worst-case scenario. Yes, extreme volatility is dangerous, no question. But that intense VTA activation, it's a powerful biological force. Surely it must have some kind of adaptive purpose. If we're aiming for functional relationships, we have to recognize that this chemical surge is often, maybe necessary just to push people past that pleasant but no fireworks stage. If we tell people to only date those who generate zero initial feeling, aren't we just setting them up for endless dating inertia? The source material itself is careful not to condemn all attraction, right? In fact, studies cited show couples who had moderate initial attraction that grew over time, they had the highest satisfaction. That suggests a foundational level of initial interest is required. So my contention is that chemistry is like the starter motor. Compatibility is the engine. You don't ask people to rip out the starter motor just because turning the key wrong can flood the engine. The key lesson here seems to be about the timing of decisions. Like, don't make huge life choices while you're, neurochemically impaired. Slow down.
But I have to stress, the evidence strongly suggests chemistry primarily acts as a blinding agent. It gives us immediate positive feedback for interactions that might be fundamentally unhealthy in the long run. We saw this clearly with the case study Sarah, right? Chasing those unpredictable partners. The inconsistency gave her huge dopamine spikes, basically conditioning her nervous system to mistaking anxiety for real attraction. So the moment a consistent, available, genuinely kind man like Tom came along, her brain screamed, "This is boring. Where's the high?" The successful approach, it seems, requires prioritizing compatibility right up front, allowing attraction to grow naturally from trust and consistency. There were those University of California longitudinal studies tracking people who made exactly this choice, and those who put compatibility over intensity, they reported dramatically higher satisfaction 5 years later, even if the initial excitement was, lower. The chemistry first group, they had this huge initial peak, but then a really sharp, often painful decline.
Initial chemical impulse is purely blinding. I see chemistry as the necessary ignition. Look, if we only rely on a cold checklist of compatibility metrics, shared values, finances lined up, whatever, we risk ending up with a scientifically sound but maybe existentially quite pessimistic view of dating. We risk passing over potentially great partners because, as the source itself notes, giving quote-unquote boring people a chance means actively overcoming the brain's conditioned demand for that dopamine hit. That initial chemical impulse, even if it's just moderate, might be the necessary fuel to get someone to stick around for the, say, 5 dates needed for compatibility to even start revealing itself.
But let's look closer at dopamine's function in this specific context. If the actual goal is a healthy, stable life partner, why should we rely on a biological system that literally rewards inconsistent, high-stress interaction? The pattern you describe needing that dopamine hit to overcome inertia, that's precisely why people get stuck in damaging cycles. Surely the goal should be to recondition the nervous system, to find predictability and safety rewarding, not to need the external spike from a potential mate's unavailability just to get us moving.
But you're still framing all intense attraction as pathology. I'm just not convinced that every lightning bolt feeling is fundamentally rooted in negative childhood stuff. If the human brain evolves to flood with these powerful chemicals when meeting a potential mate, this system must have some adaptive origin, right? Geared towards pair bonding, maybe procreation. If we dismiss every strong initial feeling as just a warning sign of a broken system, aren't we kind of rejecting an integral part of human connection?
I understand the question about adaptation. I do. But the critical distinction here is intensity and outcome, especially in our modern context. Evolution equipped us for survival, sure, but maybe not necessarily for stable 50-year monogamous partnerships. When intense, immediate feeling leads repeatedly to volatile, crashing relationships, the pattern suggests the system is miswired, or at least misapplied in adulthood. It's seeking the familiar chaos, perhaps, rather than the path towards genuine health. And the research on trauma recognition is just too robust to ignore here. High intensity, particularly when it feels linked to anxiety, that's a strong negative predictor. That 20-year Stanford longitudinal study specifically found the strongest, least volatile relationships started with moderate attraction that developed slowly over time. That really suggests the appropriate chemical level is more like a manageable hum, not a sonic boom.
Okay, that's a fair critique of volatility, but let's circle back to motivation for a second. You're demanding people prioritize the, let's say, quiet reassurance of compatibility, the absence of those 4 horsemen, which brings peace, yes, but maybe not initial drive. If someone is genuinely kind, consistent, ticks all the boxes, but generates absolutely zero biological interest, does the relationship even get past date 1 or 2? Compatibility can't just be manufactured out of thin air if there's nothing pulling you towards the person initially. Some form of initial, motivating chemical interest seems necessary to get someone to invest the time needed for trust and consistency to actually prove themselves.
But the core issue remains that consistency, the very hallmark of compatibility, things like reliable follow-up, emotional availability, it feels profoundly flat, sometimes even boring, to a brain conditioned by dopamine seeking. Unpredictability is what feeds the addiction loop. So therefore, anyone seeking long-term success has to, at some level, actively disregard their brain's initial clamoring for excitement. Look at Sarah again. She had to consciously choose that peaceful, content feeling with Tom. She had to endure the lack of the initial cocaine effect, precisely because she understood that the predictable safety was the true long-term reward.
That's a compelling point about conscious choice. But let's look at that Yale study mentioned, the one championing growing into love over falling in love. That whole process implies that some form of attraction must eventually develop, right? Otherwise, what exactly are they growing into? We're talking about the initiation phase here. That initial chemical reaction, maybe it's what allows people to overcome their own cognitive biases, their usual type, and actually dedicate time to someone different. That chemical impulse, even if you have to moderate it later, it forces the attention needed to discover the deeper compatibility. The key, I think, is allowing that initial attraction maybe to be moderate and then ensuring it grows based on trust and good communication, not on anxiety.
So for me, the evidence confirms that when evaluating new partners, the priority must be compatibility. Assessing the resilience of their conflict resolution, their emotional attunement, the strength of their shared meaning systems, that's paramount. The brain's initial signals of intense chemistry are just too unreliable. Too often they're signaling addiction or trauma recognition, not genuine suitability for a lasting partnership. Fundamentally, we have to choose long-term stability over that short-term intoxication.
I see exactly why you draw that conclusion. But I still maintain that while compatibility is, yes, the undeniable determinant of longevity, those chemical processes generating initial attraction, even if it's moderate attraction, are essential to kickstart the connection in the first place. The real lesson from all this material, I think, isn't to completely avoid the feeling, but to recognize its nature. It's potent, it's fleeting, and it can be highly misleading, which requires significant patience and maybe that 6 to 12-month waiting period before making any huge commitment decisions.
Well, we certainly seem to agree that profound, lasting satisfaction comes from relationships built on trust and consistency. The difference lies fundamentally in whether we view that initial chemical impulse as a necessary starting mechanism, one to be carefully managed, or as a fundamental, distracting obstacle that needs to be overcome entirely.
And that really is the crux of it, isn't it? The tension between that immediate biological drive and the structure needed for something sustainable.
Exactly. Hopefully, we've eliminated some of that complex interaction today, leaving the listener to consider which guiding force, that intoxicating rush of immediate chemistry, or the more measured assessment of predictable compatibility, they should prioritize when they're seeking an enduring connection.